This is a meeting of the BHS Expansion Advisory Building Committee, and we are looking to have a public hearing on the schematic and project budget for the high school, and then to have a question and answer and comment from the audience, and then we'll have some discussion as well among the members of the committee and a possible vote. So I don't want to take up too much more time with introductions, but I do, there are some new faces in the audience, and I do want you to know who we all are, and I also want you to know who the architects and our project manager are. Ray Masak can't be here. He's from the building department. And Mel Kleckner, unfortunately, also had a earlier commitment. But we have a number of committee meetings. I'm Nancy Heller, a member of the Select Board.
George Cole, Building Commissioner.
Nancy O'Connor, Park and Rec Commissioner.
Dan Bennett, Building Commissioner.
Susan Wolf at Coff School Committee.
Matt Odens, resident and planning board member.
Anthony Meyer, Brookline High School.
Andrew Bott, superintendent.
Bobby Nagel, advisory committee.
Okay, so could the architects, could you tell us your names and your role in all of this, and the project managers too?
Sure, thanks Nancy. I'm Sam Lasky with William Ron Associates Architects, and Eric Tillander and I will be presenting, but before we do that, I wanted to introduce you to our whole team. This is a large, complex project, and we've brought, we've been in a lot of these meetings, and maybe you haven't seen how many of us it really takes to do this kind of project. So we wanted to introduce everyone. Bill Ron and Cliff Gailey, two principals in our office. They've been deeply involved in all these meetings that we've been having with you all and with Anthony and Andrew and all the folks at the school. And they've just come off of a project that was transformative in the way that we hope this project is also for Brookline, which is the transformation of the Boston Public Library. It's a project that some of you all might be familiar with. And then we also have Andrew Jonik and Jin Jin Chu and Matthew Gao and Mark Horowitz, Matt Goss, Joshua Fitch from our office. So they say it takes a village, and here we are working on it. So,
and all of us thank you for the opportunity. So, but we turn it back to Sam.
And we thank
who are running the show.
We thank you for all your hard work. Excellent work.
A lot of these folks who you see have been making these models that are here that we hope help explain the project clearly for everyone.
We have Janae Ramos joining us, member of our committee from the high school. Did you guys get introduced?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Go to the microphone.
Donna, could you just grab a mic and?
Sure. Donna Camiolo, Hill International, and we're the owner's project managers assisting on the project.
Inger Hamla Foley, also a project manager with Hill International.
Inger is one of the 5.2 million Norwegians who won so many Olympic medals.
Okay. So you can see that we have this beautiful model as well as not exactly photos, but renderings around the room. And the architects are now going to go into are the monitors working? Can you see it on the monitor? Great. Okay, so why don't you begin your presentation?
Great. Thank you. So at the bottom, we've got the website for this presentation. So if anyone wants to see it afterwards, it will be available after tonight on the website for this project. So many of you have seen some of the things we're going to review tonight, but we thought we'd try to bring the different threads we've been talking about at these several meetings together in this presentation. And to begin at the beginning, so to speak, why did you all embark on this project? roughly a year ago when the feasibility study was being worked on. Several key reasons. You know, the biggest, most dominant is school keeps growing. You know, even just a few years ago, it was several hundred students less than it is now, and it's expected to grow about 700 more students than it is now, and just won't fit. So that's kind of the biggest driver. For those of you familiar with the state of the science classrooms up on the 3rd floor of the existing building, there are myriad challenges there and aren't living up to the emphasis on science teaching that we all know is very important now. And over the last year or so, the school has developed a new education plan. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but here you can see some of these key goals. And so the challenge is, how can we get this project and these new buildings to help support that plan? That's a major goal here. There are constraints on being able to live up to the goals of that plan with the current facilities. And lastly, there are deferred maintenance, so to speak, that this is an opportunity to address some key parts of the campus infrastructure. So you've heard who we are. So as I mentioned, roughly a year ago, a feasibility study was embarked upon, and these key components of the project that we'll talk about were kind of where that study led to, and that's kind of the direction we've been working on since then. And in the phase that we call schematic design for the last 6 months, and that basically we began trying to dig more carefully and in a more detailed way into the kinds of spaces that the high school needs to live up to that education plan. Come up with a list of all the spaces in the building, in the several parts of the project that architects call a program, and then from that start to develop the organization of the several projects, how they are organized internally, how big they are, and then what they would look like on the exterior. And as we're doing that, develop cost estimates to help understand what all this would mean from that point of view, and try to kind of test that and merge all those different threads together. So this, you all have seen these slides before, but the main point here is, as I just said, we began with this program verification. We've been doing the design, and so we're kind of here, and then there's kind of the town approval process after this. So that's what this says. So Eric?
Yeah, I want to talk about a bit of our process as an office begins with listening. And so we began with a series of, I won't even call them, we attended school to start off with, would be the best way to put it. We actually had students take us around, but we also started to meet with faculty, we met with staff, and we started to develop inputs to the process. And if you saw the process as we moved through, if you saw the plans, each of these ideas started to evolve the plans and develop more clarity around what was in them. And it was an important aspect of how we developed both the list of spaces, but also how they were organized. And we would come on campus for 2 days, have a series of meetings. Each one of these is actually a multi-day visit. Thankfully, the MLK room was a great place to set up the models and engage across the board. That also extended to Brinkton neighborhood, where John and Mary hosted us in their family room, which was quite gracious, which also included inputs that are affecting particularly the 111 Cypress site and how we develop that massing. And more recently, we actually just had if you will, a comparable event to this without the PowerPoint and the formality, but set this up in the MLK in the library, with the students and the faculty coming to see what had been developed, where it had evolved to, and understand what was going on. It's incredible the amount of student interest in this project, because they understand palpably these level of overcrowding, the level of engagement that this offers them as a community.
was also amazing to see how many kids were in the library. I swear that there were never that many kids in my high school library. But it was also a lesson for us in the Cypress building where there's planned to be library space, kind of how important that is and kind of the kinds of things it should try to accomplish. So, kind of being able to see these spaces live over the last 6 months as, just being in the school alive, kind of understand how it works and where the kids want to be and that kind of thing.
So just to give a brief summary of what's next, a lot of what happens next, we don't stop working in this process collectively. There's a lot of town review within the town proper processes, as well as we're looking at the energy models and sort of the systems in a more detailed fashion. So there's an ongoing process that leads really to the town vote in May.
So just to be more specific on what the project consists of, it's probably easier to see here. There's a new building planned at 111 Cypress, and this building is planned to cross the Mbta Green Line tracks. So during this presentation, you'll probably hear us refer to the process with the Mbta and getting their approval, so that is ongoing and critical to this project for reasons we'll explain shortly. The science classrooms that are currently on the 3rd floor plan to take the Roberts Wing down and build a new science STEM project here, and that's complete with the ability to renovate the classroom space on the 3rd floor. There are renovations to Tappan that we'll explain, as well as improvements to Cypress Field. So those are the 5 main components of the project. There's some landscape work along Tappan Street, given that kids will be walking back and forth along that a lot. So, and the other key part, as I keep referring to, is the education plan. A lot of the exterior of the building design has to do with the sense of a unified campus, but as we describe what's happening in each of the 2 projects, we'll try to address ways that we're dealing with these 2 aspects of the education plan as well. So one of the things that emerged in those early listening sessions was the idea that the Cypress building shouldn't be just a 9th grade building, shouldn't be perceived as basically just a separate part of the campus. How do we get it to feel like one campus? And students have to go back and forth. If 9th graders spend all day in here, then they are, in fact, separated. So you can see the idea is that many of the classes you take as a 9th grader will be here, but some things like world languages, health and fitness would take place in Tappan or in the main building. And likewise, there'd be classes that upper class students would be taking in the Cypress building. So we're trying to get a 2-way street between the 2. We're trying to, you'll see how we're doing this. Maybe some of you have seen the model, but we're trying to have each of the buildings face onto Cypress Field. There's something wonderfully civic about this setup around Cypress Field with residential buildings on 2 sides and the school on 2 sides, and ensuring that the Cypress building crosses the tracks and has a real sense of address on Tappan. I keep wanting to call it the Tappan building instead of the Cypress building because I think that's really the bigger idea here, is to get it to be an address on Tappan facing Cypress Field, just the way UAB and Tappan and the main building do. So it's crossing the tracks and getting this to be a real front to the building lets it join its brethren. And at kind of a programmatic level, there's an opportunity to kind of embed the sense of campus within how the building is used, not just by the high school, but by the community as well. Obviously, there are things that happen in the auditorium or the cafeteria. There are adult ed classes in UAB and in the main building. But as you'll see, there are facilities planned within the 111 Cypress building that the community would also benefit from for after-hours meetings, events, performances, that kind of thing. So trying to ensure that this building, as well as parts of the STEM building, can add to the stock of resources for the community as a whole.
introduce the 111 Cypress building a little bit more specifically. As Sam alluded to, this idea of a big front porch, and we'll talk consistently about this in all the project components, but that you would have something fronting onto Cypress Field, that it actually has the ability to come off of Cypress Street, but that the primary linkage is down towards Tappan Street, and giving that entry a moment to look out over the main field. So here you get that idea of the front porch with the most active uses, and this is both to put them onto the field side and away from the neighborhood side, but also to act as that kind of front moment where you're exposed to all the life of the party, as it were, in terms of what's going on in the school. It also has the benefit that you haven't had as a community of when you enter the building after hours for public events, rather than trying to find your way deep into the bowels of a large building, you're actually, these might be the spaces, the white box, for example, might be the space where there might be an evening lecture or a gathering of that sort. So it's able to bring that activity onto the most civic green. We're also looking at that on the second floor, where the Cypress meeting room, analogous to the MLK room, could sit above, as well as the library having that kind of civic presence for both the students during the day, but also after hours. Now, this goes a little bit more to the education plan and the idea of collaborative learning. This is also about flexibility in terms of how the spaces are utilized. So we started to explore this idea of an interdisciplinary quilt that came out of all the discussions with faculty as well as administration. And what this really says is that most of the classrooms can be multi-purpose. They can be used for math, they can be used for science, they can be used for English. We do have some specifics for physics, but even there, we're trying to also create these collaboration moments between classrooms. So it facilitates the ability for classes to have some cross-discipline interaction, but also at the same time have the opportunity to be a little bit more flexible, how they might open up to some of those exterior spaces.
So you could imagine one could have all the math classrooms on one floor and the social study on another, and this was an idea that is coming from the school, that having them commingled on a floor rather than separated was part of living up to this goal of creating connections between these different disciplines in the way that they're taught, understanding that there are connections between social studies and English, and creating opportunities for teachers to draw those out with their students by having them nearby.
It also is about those gathering spaces between the classrooms that are significant in the existing high school, and there aren't enough of them per the students' use patterns for those small group gatherings, for the ability to meet after class and touch base on what your project is that you're trying to share resources. We have these online. I won't go through every single plan, but it's a pretty tight stacking diagram. Touching base on how this building responds to the education plan, I think the idea of this civic presence and being part of the unified campus is something that is at the heart of this leaning into Cypress Field idea. The idea of having this flexible classroom that allows for this quilt interdisciplinary notion of the teaching to really engage the students. And really this idea that the building itself has all these niches that allow the variety of places to gather, this kind of find your niche. Oh, sorry, I'll speak into the microphone better. This is early schematic, but looking at how the landscape engages the building around it, and in particular how there's a buffer all the way around this building to engage each of the distinct sides of this building. You want to start with Sam? Sure.
So we'll move to the STEM wing, and the one of the most important things we noticed about the existing building there is that students use it as though it were a front door, even though it doesn't necessarily look like that or wasn't necessarily planned to be that. But there's just a huge number of students who are coming and going to Tappan or UAB, or even at the beginning or end of the school day that are, arriving that way. And so seeing how students are really using the building, we wanted to take this as an opportunity, not just for the science, biology, chemistry classrooms that will be in this building, but to transform the sense of an entrance, make a real entrance, and when you enter, have kind of a direct line of sight to the quad and to the cafeteria, to a set of stairs that could take you directly up from the entrance up to the second floor where you can get to the auditorium easily. So right now, all the students are using this, but it's not real obvious how to navigate through the building. So we're trying to use this new wing as a way to make it easier for students to get where they're going throughout the project. So there are purposes beyond just the biology and chemistry classrooms. That said, this interdisciplinary idea has also emerged in this building, that biology and chemistry are sharing a floor. We're trying to create those same kind of collaboration spaces between classrooms. But really, we've tried to organize the plan on each floor as kind of a crossroads. If you're coming from the central building here, where the atrium is, and the library, or if you're coming from the rest of the building, auditorium area, that you kind of have this crossroads. That's where the stairs are. That's where what we're calling the science resource room. It's a chance for it'll be a chance, kind of a new thing, a chance for students to be able to meet with teachers outside of class time and get help on projects that they're working on. Also, that's where the faculty will be. So we're trying to let students use this crossroads as a way to kind of have new opportunities in the sciences that they haven't had before. And whether you're going to a science class or not, lots of people are going to be walking through here and getting a chance to kind of see what's happening in the science wing, unlike today when it's on the third floor and you might have, you're not going there as often. So this is kind of getting the sciences more front and center than they are today in the organization of the high school as a whole. So these spaces on the ground floor, especially that kind of overflow space for the cafeteria and the culinary arts program, they kind of join this network of spaces where students can hang out, where gatherings or events could happen. So right now the atrium and the cafeteria and the auditorium are kind of the only ones. We're trying to make kind of a new hub for the school there on the ground floor.
And we should add that that's also important for the community, because right now you walk in that door, it's not an accessible entry to begin with. It's actually something where you come in and have to immediately go up a flight of stairs. But it's also a little bit disorienting when you first come to the high school if you're not a student. Frankly, since we were there the first week of school and met a lot of the freshman students, it was also disorienting to them. But they learned their way around pretty quickly. To come just for that one town meeting or another, it's actually it's a pretty tight approach to get into the high school for events. So this is an improvement that actually is only in the one corner of the building, but actually serves the entire building to suddenly unlock the potential to get around the entire high school. We want to talk about facade a little bit. The existing facade on the top there was sort of a B, C in terms of the building widths. This gives us a chance to look at it as really a more symmetrical A in the center and then B and B on the sides, not matching the exact width, but making it more commensurate. It's also something where we're honoring the cornice line there to kind of bring them all into a collective. And what's interesting in plan is that the buildings were all, of course, built over time and had interesting relationships to each other. We actually have the chance to take this building and align to the front of the central building, but bring a colonnade out in front. And ultimately what that does, and what we were actually most impressed with, is that students don't leave the high school right away, even in bad weather. They kind of spill out and hang out in front of this high school. Sam and I always comment that we always ran away from our high school after the last class, but here students actually spend a little bit of time, and it's both an identity. There are groups that form and are able to find their collective spot on campus, but also, it's that great moment where people say, okay, I have to go to practice, so Sam, you finish that part of our group project and I'll touch base with you later, or whatever the discussion needs to be. It happens right in this kind of moment before you actually disperse and go off to your activities. So reinforcing that hangout, and it sounds very unacademic, and yet it actually is sort of critical to the success of the students.
So right now in front of the Roberts Wing, they don't do that as much because it's not as inviting the way it is other areas. So we're trying to kind of extend that kind of culture or pattern of use to the front of the new science wing by creating this porch that some of you may have seen in the model. And in a lot of ways, you see here, in a lot of ways that was the thinking behind the porch on the Cypress building that we showed a few minutes ago, is that can we create that same sense of a place to hang out and be in front of that building, so that kind of sense of identity, what makes Brookline High can exist at the Cypress building as well.
When we turn the corner, the stepping back of the facades actually helps break down mass into more discrete moments and read a little bit like a smaller building. As well as on the inside, there's that idea of getting some glass that opens up to the quad and makes a stronger connection, so you're not just isolated from the great outdoor space. Here's just a indicative
That
ground
sense
floor.
of a porch
Yep.
in the entrance. So again, this is, in terms of the sense of a unified campus, this is about transforming this entrance to become, a real recognized and central part of how you move around the campus and into the main building, and make it easier to navigate. We're trying to engage students in ways that they can't now through some of these resources within the science program, and engage all the students, serving everyone with this kind of new hub space on the ground floor, and then this kind of transformed entrance, creating extra space that's adjacent to the outdoors for cafe seating, that kind of thing.
So quickly, we'll talk a little bit about the third floor renovations, because once you take science out, you actually get a whole...
All these things need a home.
Some of those came out of the Roberts Wing that were there previously and would be reallocated. But it was really looking at this plan and starting to create some areas that, A, connect to the outside, where you can actually get a window at the end of the corridor, helps orient the students, but also that we could create around the business program, relocating that here and creating a little collaboration. There's a lot of interest from the students, for example, in incubators and what's going on and how do they take what they've learned and get the word out. And this becomes a little resource, if you will, for those types of activities.
So there are one of the things that happens in a number of parts of the school, and that we are trying to do in the Cypress, is have that adult presence
That's true.
throughout. That's not really the case on the science floor in terms of deans or guidance, social work. So we're trying to bring some of those elements to this floor as well, to kind of extend that logic of students being able to find adults that they can talk with when they need to everywhere. And also there's a chance to take the ACE program and kind of relocate it from kind of a more remote area into a more prominent area, and that seemed kind of like a relevant idea in terms of this kind of equality through the school of the different programs and ways that students are served.
Tappan, we also are touching as part of all this, and Tappan is a very difficult building, both in how it exists right now, but also it doesn't respond in the same way that the other existing buildings do to being on the civic green. And so part of it was, how do we give it a front porch feel in the same way? So what we're really looking at is on the lower level and the main entry level, there's a vast array of locker rooms that are underutilized. In fact, there are a lot of broken lockers down there at the moment. And so reallocating that space on the main level, where we can get the health and wellness classrooms, we can expand the fitness center, We can create consolidated offices that aren't within the locker rooms, so they're actually gender neutral. You can actually have different gender staff, as well as consolidating the entry between the pool and the gym, which helps solve the which door did I go into quandary that a lot of people have. And then looking at a possible either fitness room or community room facing the green right up in front of the pool wall, the large blank wall. All the lockers then go onto the lower floor, and we actually have some gender neutral locker rooms. We also have the physical therapy, occupational therapy room, particularly associated around some of the special education programs. So those are consolidated. If you're special education, you're not necessarily sent off to some other part of campus. You're actually part of where everyone is, which is more integrated. And also a bag drop was something that's been talked about, so the students aren't hauling all their sweaty athletic gear to class all the time, but instead just dropping it off, not in a locker room, but in a room that can then be locked down until after school. So much more of a consolidation here. On the upper floors, much more light touch in terms of improving some of the finishes and getting some of the lighting, those sort of things, paint.
Accessibility upgrades as well.
Accessibility upgrades throughout. And what that does, just as a pure elevation shot, is start to give it a little bit more of that civic presence we were talking about, and give it a little bit of the parity with the other buildings that exist surrounding Cypress Field.
It's a little dark in here, but some of you may have seen this drawing earlier where you can see this porch idea in Cypress, front piece on tap end, and this colonnaded porch on the STEM building. So the different components of the high school, getting this element that repeats, that is meant to be more welcoming and change the kind of sense of arrival into these buildings, and kind of help unify the campus by having that element that is repeating from one part to another through the campus.
Project budget. That's all you, Don.
So Eric and Sam had talked about the process that they went through. William Ron, they issued a schematic design set for pricing in mid-January. We took the set and we went out to 2 cost estimating firms to get current pricing on the entire plan. Both firms came in and we worked together as a team to reconcile the estimates to make sure that we were covering all of the aspects of the project. So let's just see, I think I just have to switch this one. Right to here. Walking you through where the budget's at, the hard costs, which would include the Cypress Street building, the STEM building, the 3rd floor renovations, deferred maintenance that's been identified, as well as the tap and gym, along with any construction contingencies. The current budget is at $137.6 million. The soft costs, which include your professional fees, commissioning agents, the CM at risk for their pre-construction services that will be coming on board shortly, any utility costs, testing agencies, the moving costs, as well as your project contingencies, is currently at $23.6 million. The FF&E and technology, so that's all of your loose furniture, any of your equipment, the AV and any IT items, that's at $5.5 million. The real estate costs for both Cypress Street acquisition and relocation, as well as the anticipated Mbta Air Rights, is at $23.5 million. And then we have other costs, which include the campus landscaping and sidewalks connecting the entire campus together, some improvements that would need to be done there, any swing space for while we're in construction for the relocation of the students, as well as the real estate contingencies, and that's another $9.6 million. And the Cypress Field is at $5.8 million for a total project cost of $205.6 million. And then I'm going to let you guys give a summary.
Just to end on, this is the image of the model that's sitting on the table here. And one of the things that, looking back at this process, the amount of the the opportunity this is to really generate a kind of civic presence to the high school and land it in the town of Brookline in a kind of very powerful way. That's something that the students are very keen on, is they feel that when they come out of their elementary schools, because they're coming from those K through 8 schools, not through a secondary, intermediate, but they are actually coming straight to a high school, and that high school for them is so much a civic institution on par with town hall, on par with the type of responsible adult language that they should be sort of endeavoring to excel in. And there's something also powerful in how Brookline uses its high school so consistently. Other towns, I live in Wellesley, they go to the high school for performances, they might go to the high school because they have kids there like I do, or basketball or sports, but the amount of adult ed, the amount of engagement for town meeting, the amount of kind of civic, institutional engagement directly utilizing the high school is both a problem from the deferred maintenance that we look at and the wear and tear, but it is also just really locks the use of the school and these facilities into what this community is all about. And that to us has been so exciting to be a part of as we talk to students, as we talk to staff, as we talk to anyone in this community that has come up to us. And we just want to leave with that for right now.
Okay, great. Can you do me a favor and push the button over there so we turn on the light? Thank you very much, both Sam and Eric from Ron and Donna from Hill. We're going to have some discussion now about everything we've seen, but first, before we do that, I want to just take a couple of minutes, the chair's kind of prerogative here, to just review, for those of you in the audience who haven't always been to every meeting, as some of us have, the history of how we got here. And I'll do it very briefly and abbreviatedly, but we started in September of 2016, and we said to the then architects, HMFH, okay, we have this building, and we need to have enrollment needs met, and we need science, we have science needs, and what can you do on this site? And they came up with essentially 3 options. One was a very, very, what they called the lowest option of $180 million that did not include Cypress Field, for instance, and it really wasn't very satisfactory in terms of meeting the enrollment or science needs. And then the middle option was about, and I'm rounding the numbers here a little bit, but $80 million. Did I say thousand? No, million. Okay. 280 million was the middle option, which got us the enrollment increases, space that we needed, and the science renovations. And again, it didn't include anything for Cypress Field, nor did I think that those 2 options included Tappan. Later, Tappan was added. And then there was a Taj Mahal, if I can call it that, option of $378 million, which got us everything we would ever want, a field house and a bunch of other stuff. And we all looked at that and we said, well, no, that's just not acceptable. But the lower number wasn't acceptable either because it wasn't satisfactory in terms of our needs. So we said, okay, $280 million, that's a lot. Imagine, what if we had another piece of property and we could put another building somewhere that would take care of our enrollment increase? What could that do for us? And the answer came back that we would, again, not including Cypress Field, although they did include Tappan at this point. They came back, and one estimate was 137 without Tappan and 150 with Tappan, 150 million. And we said, wow, that's pretty amazing. there's a delta there between 280 million and 150 million that we can buy a piece of property and we can make sure Cypress Field is included and some of the other things that we have below the line and still not come near that 280 million. And so we began to explore that. As you know, we ended up taking 111 Cypress Street by eminent domain for this purpose, and which is why we have the building there. And we do own it now. We took it in January. That was authorized by town meeting in November. So we're ending up with a project that's now 205.6 million. Of course, anybody here wishes it would be less, but we realized that it was significantly less than the earlier studies of about 280 million, and it gets us more. It gets us much more. I can't say too much more about that unless you wanted to add, or were any other committee members that I leave out any of our history? Okay. So with that, why don't I first open it up to committee members? Do you have any questions about what you've seen? I mean, you've seen most of this before in one various form or another, but you might have some additional questions. Nope? Okay. This is a public hearing, and we will take comments and questions from the audience. How many people would like the opportunity to speak? Okay, 1, 2, 3. I see 5 or 6, 7 hands. Oh,
Okay.
this is
This is the first list. There's another list out there.
Oh, there's another list out there. Okay, so I see about 7 or so people. So what if we say 3 minutes apiece, and then we'll have questions and answers, and we'll be able to continue the agenda from there. So you want to just line up here? I can call your name. Keith Grove? Are you still here?
Oh, okay. He was just signing in.
Okay. Oh.
Welcome.
Susan Vishner.
No, we thought that was in attendance.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, I think I'm going to put this over here. Ben is coming with another one. Thank you. Okay, let's start again. Janice Kahn.
Thank you. Janice Kahn. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 15, also on the advisory committee, which is the finance committee of the town, and I didn't intend to speak first. And I want to first say how impressive this really is, and I appreciate Nancy's history of how we got here to a more reasonable, more extensive project. But I'd like to roll back history a little bit further to February of 2016, when school committee members came before the advisory committee and made a really persuasive case for not going for MSBA funding to support renovating the high school. And the argument was twofold, really. One was that we could do it faster, and the kids were in the pipeline already, and we needed to accommodate the increased student population, and we got that. And the other piece was that it could be done for probably a third of the cost than it would have been had we gone for MSBA funding. And so we thought that was persuasive too. However, the numbers we were given were very different from what we've heard tonight. And the number that was presented in February of 2016 was $100 million. And 200 and almost 206 million gives me pause. And I think it would have given pause to almost everybody on advisory, although I can't speak for everybody. I will speak for myself. I was persuaded at $100 million. I'm not persuaded at 206 million, and I'll explain part of why I'm not persuaded. So one of the presenters said, was from Wellesley. Wellesley redid its high school. It cost, the cost of the project was $115,987,740, and MSBA reimbursed 40% of that cost. North, which up until Somerville had the highest price tag, was a $200 million, actually $197,499,511 project, which certainly gave MSBA pause, but they did reimburse at 60%. And Somerville, which is now being renovated, and now it's going to take the #1 spot as the most expensive high school that MSBA is going to help, is coming in at $256 million, so higher than what we've heard tonight. But MSBA is reimbursing 47%. And I understand why we didn't go for MSBA funding. We wanted to. We were told that with the expensive devotion project happening in the town, and that's a $120 million project, of which the good taxpayers, property taxpayers of Brookline are going to be seeing a $50 million increase in payment that we will have to start paying for that $50 million. My question, I do have a question. So my question is, I get the speed with which we could do this, and I want to know where the cost efficiencies are. Thank you.
Okay.
Take all the comments, or do one at a time?
Pardon me?
Do you want to take all the comments and then do one by one?
No, let's answer the question. If we could, Sam or Eric, take a stab at that?
I was wondering if they should get everyone.
Sam, you want me to get started? We don't know all the history with the decision of MSBA or not MSBA. I know there are a lot of rules associated with that in terms of how you get reimbursed and to what percentage, and there are a lot of restrictions on that. We've tried to take advantage of the ability to not hold absolute to the standards and therefore garner a little bit more efficiency in the plan. We've tried to look at opportunities to use dual use that MSBA doesn't allow you to use. So we've been looking for those efficiencies as they relate to the architecture, and in that capacity reduce the actual footprint, while at the same point not making it so tight that you all of a sudden find yourself outgrowing your school as soon as it's built. And that's a kind of conundrum that ties to the flexibility. And MSBA doesn't allow that flexibility in a lot of its standards. And that's a virtue of not being MSBA. We've been allowed to try and take advantage of that. Exactly how the funding mechanisms, obviously, we don't know exactly how that works. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, the numbers that you were quoting, I don't know if they, I'm assuming that they were construction and soft cost numbers, and I don't know if they included land acquisition or other components to them.
I don't think it included land acquisition.
Right.
Susan Dinkoff might know for sure what that figure, that ballpark would meant.
Yeah. That's
the comparable number here was the one about, if you added up those numbers, the comparable number was around 167 million, not the 200. There's been escalation since some of those projects, at least some of those current number. So I would say we're kind of under some of those if you compare construction to soft costs. Is how, if I'm understanding those numbers correctly, if we're trying to get.
I was really trying to get at, if we had to bring this project down a little bit more, where could we find some savings?
Let me just take a stab at this, because one, I want to talk about the $149 million number. That was a number generated from cartoons. It was done during feasibility, and it was really done as an order of magnitude estimate to compare, at that point, 4 options. This option, and 3 options that included extensive renovations of the existing buildings and additions to the existing building. This option, as presented, even with real estate acquisition costs, was significantly less expensive than the other options. The absolute number was really a guess. It was taken off of cartoon drawings. The 149 was an order of magnitude relative to the other options, and it was by far the cheapest option. So what are we doing in terms of cost efficiencies relative to this option? Well, the real estate is what the real estate is. We really had to take 111 Cypress for its market value per state regs and laws. But the rest of the buildings are Cypress Street is a relatively simple building. The real extravagance there is crossing the tracks, which we all felt was compelling relative to connection to the rest of the campus. The addition to Tappan Gym is extremely modest, and that building is extremely tired and needs renovation, modest renovation. The STEM wing is, again, a very efficient addition to the high school. We have included some extra circulation space to that building because the way it's used. But in terms of cutting back, I think you could cut back scope. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could always cut out the Tappan Gym piece. You could always not do Cypress Field now. In terms of the basic renovation to the high school and the addition to the STEM wing, there isn't a lot there that you could cut back without cutting back program. And in terms of the Cypress, 111 Cypress building, I suppose you could plan a building that was significantly taller and significantly wider without crossing the tracks. But I think that would do a disservice to both the overall campus planning and to the Brington neighborhood. So I think we've already looked at a lot of those cost efficiencies in this plan.
The only other thing I'll mention is that if I'm not mistaken, the Newton North building was completed started about 8 years ago and started about 10 years ago. So I don't know what the escalation is in terms of construction costs between then and now, but I suspect it's pretty substantial. I also think that, as George mentioned, some of the other pieces in terms of the pool, the gym, the field, there are a lot of other pieces in this project that I think, because this is such a community resource, and so many people, if we think about even everybody going through town meeting, through that new STEM wing into the auditorium, it just felt like a real community resource and needed to be treated that way, and not just as, let's just build 27 classrooms or whatever it was. It really is a campus that everyone uses. So at any rate, I think that we're just, it's a pretty different project in what this is trying to do than some of those other ones. So I don't know if that helps give some context, but.
Thank you. Thanks to both Susan and George, and the architects. So who else in the audience would like, okay.
Oh, goodness. Lauren Bernard, town meeting member, Precinct 8. I had a question that relates to the real estate costs listed here. You cite $23.5 million for the Cypress Street acquisition and relocation. You just remarked before that market value is market value, so it had to be acquired at market value. So my question is, what did you all pay for? What did we pay for 111 Cypress? And what were the Mbta Air Rights? Can we have a breakdown of this figure here? And also a secondary question, less important question, but what is planned for the field that would be $5.8 million? Thank you.
So I'll field the real estate question. This is really my area of expertise. There will be an appraised value for 111 Cypress. Is that public yet, or is that? No, it is. It's 15.6 million.
15.9 million was the appraisal, and this is not actually market appraisal. It's very technical appraisal that's used in eminent domain in its highest and best use. And the appraiser gave us an amount of 15.9. In addition, town meeting approved $500,000 in associated costs, fees, legal, and we were obligated to relocate the tenant.
So in terms of the Mbta Air Rights, the Mbta does a market value appraisal of their air rights, but included in that number is the premium for doing a project that is constructed over a Mbta right-of-way, which includes very restrictive construction covenants, replacing any of the utilities or signals that we might disrupt, and working to Mbta protocols, which are very strict in terms of accommodating the Green Line's operation. So within that number, those are the premiums associated with the acquisition and utilization of the Mbta Air Rights.
Can I just follow up? So if I understand you correctly, my understanding is we've already paid for the 111 parcel, so.
Yes, we have paid for it, but we have done some short-term borrowing, and that borrowing needs to be authorized as part of the project. We will begin payment on it in July.
Okay. And so, the air rights, that's an estimate and sort of best guess. Negotiation. Okay, it's a negotiation. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed Arthur's name on this list. Arthur Conquest.
Sign up, because I didn't see it, but I can come up now.
You want to come up now? Sure, come up.
Somebody put your name.
Did we answer your question?
The second question was about the fields.
Yeah.
Oh, the fields.
Oh,
that's right.
Oh, Cypress Field.
Well, Nancy, do you want to just reflect the conversation that you had? So the $5.8 million came from the Parks and Rec Commission, and we are using that as a number in here. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the conversation that you guys had?
So the Park and Rec Commission will have a design review for the field renovation at the end of when this project is coming to an end. There's a budget of 5.8. Does that include what's in the CIP already?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there's some money in the CIP already to do a Cypress Field, and the larger amount of money, there's a range, and I don't have the numbers, so I'll have to talk to you about it after, but there's a range for natural turf versus synthetic turf. The Park Commission voted to approve the higher budget if, when we are in design review, we choose to do synthetic turf, we'll have the funds here. If we choose not to do it, we won't have to use them. But that number will include playground equipment, turf, plantings all around the park, fencing, lighting, basketball court, all that kind of thing.
So Nancy, when, just roughly, when does that happen in this project? When does that, because I know there's a lot of interest in synthetic versus natural turf, just when does that decision happen?
There'll be about a year before this process is finishing, we will more than likely convene a design review committee, 3 members of the neighborhood, 4 members of the Park Commission, and then there'll be a whole design process, which is what we do in all of our parks. And we look forward to participation. That's, you have a meeting and then you send the designers out to draw it all up, and they come back in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or so, or a week and a half. I see you're all laughing in there. The architects are laughing. And week and a half is all you need. And then you come back and then we play with it again. So it's 3 or 4 meetings or more. And then when we're done, we assume that the renovation will be done and we'll be able to sort of have it all finished at the same time or near the same time. We don't want the project to start until the school's almost done.
And that's so obviously, it won't get messed up, and also so that the construction people won't be in each other's way, because there will be a lot going on there. So we would prefer to have Cypress Field done at the end, in essence. Arthur, you signed up to speak.
Arthur Conquest, town meeting member, Precinct 6, 115 Tappan Street. In addition to being a town meeting member, I'm the chair of the Adult and Community Ed program that runs classes, programs, activities from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Sunday. Although on the weekends, it's a little abbreviated, but we still run programs on the weekend in the high school and in various satellite facilities. Whenever I attend any of the meetings like this, and this is my second, and I go back and ask the staff at the Adult and Community Ed, do you know anything about this? Not a single iota do they know about what's going on in terms of the projects that you've got planned. And I know that you're far along at this point, but someone should appraise the Adult and Community Ed director something about what this project is going to entail with the Adult and Community Ed and how they may change. I know that they have programs at the Korean Church, but if they have new buildings or new classrooms that are going to be available, I don't care if it's 3 years from now, then they should be aware of that. And I think that, you know, someone from the Adult and Community Ed should be on your committee, or maybe one of the advisory board members, or something along those lines. Number two, I heard the Cypress Park field, the Cypress Field mentioned. Now, there are competing groups that have been going back and forth about Cypress Field in terms of artificial versus natural turf. Has a decision been made about that?
No.
No. Okay, so this is, when you say the $5 million, it's just a general overall cost. Okay.
Correct, 5.8, yeah.
Okay, but at some point, someone's going to come back.
Yep.
to
There'll be a more specific design review toward the end, but, you know, technology and ideas change, and that could be 3 years from now. So we'll only have a design review now of something that's not going to be constructed for 3 years.
Okay.
That would be crazy.
Okay.
So Parks and Rec will have that towards the end of the project.
Maybe at some point, someone from this committee could get all the external programs that are over there at Webster Place, you know, and do some kind, I don't even think they get emails. I got an email because John Bassett sent one out maybe last night or day before. Then Virginia LaPlante said, Arthur, we're going to the meeting I'm here, okay? That's how okay? So, but maybe you might want to do the same thing for the external programs like BEEP and so on and so forth, so that they can be aboard and look at some long-range planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Good.
Anybody else? John Bassett.
Thank you. I'm John Bassett. I'm also a town meeting member from Precinct 6, which is the precinct where this is. I live at 26 Searle Avenue, Brookline. I'm a veteran of the discussion on whether to temporarily close Greeno Street. And looking at all this makes me guess that we will have a similar discussion about the safety of the children and the staff in relation to Tappan Street. I confess that I was adamantly, furiously opposed to closing Greeno Street. I think my position may have been overstated. We've survived with it closed, and the people on Welland Road have survived, although I think they haven't loved the additional traffic. Sitting here, I think it might be, the impacts might be much greater closing Tappan Street than closing Greeno Street. The impacts on other streets, Walnut Street, Washington Street, and so forth, it might be wiser to add signals, traffic calming, whatever. I think it's going to need additional things to make it safer for kids and staff, but it might be wiser to keep it open during construction and after, making whatever allowances we can make for increasing safety. That's my comment. Thank you. Thank you for having this hearing. It's good.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Back there.
I might just quickly respond to Mr.
ahead.
Bassett
Sure.
to say
Go
that
ahead.
part of our conversations, Mr. Bassett, have focused on the safety of Tappan Street. And I think we have kids darting across that road from the field to get over to the UA or to get over to Tappan Gym, and adding another building at 111. Certainly how we keep that safe for students is incredibly important.
Yeah, and just to that point, there is a line item under other costs, campus landscaping, sidewalk, and student safety. Just to that, that's part of the 9.5 million. So just, it's in there. So sorry, it's tiny print. That could have been bigger, but yes.
But we don't have any specific plans about that yet. Yeah. And identify yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Roger Grandy, a teacher at the high school, social studies teacher, and hello to colleagues as well. I've seen the design, and when the architects were over at the high school, I had an opportunity with some other teachers to also present in a more abbreviated way a couple of things I'd like to propose here. I want to say that of course, this new facility provides an amazing opportunity that I'd like to see that we don't squander what I think are some things that I see as missing as a teacher. Of course, budgets and design transmits values. My job as a high school teacher is to prepare students for the future. And I think at this point it's got to include something about sustainability as far as what we do on a day-to-day or week-by-week basis. And I really think that the design has to create opportunities for us to transmit those values and to educate our students to prepare for the future, perhaps for the biggest challenge that they'll face in their lifetimes. So I think modestly I'd like to suggest two things, and I'll say a little bit why about each, but one is some sort of facility or raised beds opportunity for students to grow food, and secondly a small, this is probably not the right terminology, but small bank of solar panels and a wind turbine somewhere in this, probably in the new building. So why, first off, why gardening? I think there's several reasons that I think are actually pretty important. One, it provides students with an opportunity to have an authentic learning experience that is a living laboratory. It engages students with the food system to provide a rich and interdisciplinary opportunity to learn about culture, economics, policy, life sciences, and the environment. We heard some talk about interdisciplinary learning, which I'm really thrilled that the architects are considering. I think allowing students to grow food allows them to control, as an example of a way that students can control what they're learning and to empower them to, again, engage in authentic learning. It connects students to the natural world at a time when many students, particularly in urban areas, are distanced from nature and need to understand the importance of stewardship going forward. It further connects students to their food system, which again is especially important, I think for a whole host of reasons, but particularly at a time when we see skyrocketing rates of diabetes and when students are increasingly disempowered from their control over what they consume, food and otherwise. I'd like to see some emphasis on outdoor learning spaces in particular, again, for a whole host of reasons, but including, which hasn't been mentioned, that they provide a therapeutic setting for students who experience stress, which again is a major part of, increasingly a part of what we do at the high school. A couple other points. Again, I mentioned interdisciplinary opportunities. That includes also culture, to bring food and so forth as a way to connect, say, social studies in the foreign language department. And finally, it allows students to connect with community members, such as the food pantry, and other community-based educators who could participate in some of the kind of things I'm talking about to provide education and have more connection with the community. Just briefly about wind and solar. Again, I think it'd be great if we could power the school with alternative energy, but I don't see that happening. But at least a small facility for students to be able to think more globally about their consumption, to have instruments to monitor alternative energy, even on a small scale, to think critically about innovation, to manage, again, the future challenges that I referred to earlier. And again, I think it's about transmitting our values about what we want students to do going forward as engaged and informed citizens. Just lastly, I think the most dynamic sector of the food movement is really located in schools, nationally, internationally, and I'd hate to see that movement pass us by. I think it's at least incumbent on the planners to explain why they don't want to or haven't considered investing in the sort of things I've proposed here. I think these things are actually pretty mainstream at this point in education, and I'd urge us all to consider some of the things I've mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say a word or two, or maybe the architects would, about the sustainability and energy issues. We have focused in many of the discussions issues about energy being not only focus on conservation, but also on renewables. And our roofs, for instance, are solar ready. We're following the resolutions that town meeting has adopted on solar ready roofs and net zero for the 9th school, the LEED requirements. But maybe you want, and the architects will tell you that they've hired a special consultant called the Green Engineer to help them make sure that this building brings in as low as possible energy utilization index, which we call EUI.
Yeah, I would say I like everything you just said. We're in schematic design, and there's a lot more design to come in this project, and obviously we've tried to engage with faculty and students at the school, and the intention in the next phase of design is to keep doing that. So I think we should have those conversations and see where that could find a home in the project. You know, it's a big project, and yet it's also kind of a tight, trying to use the land that we have. Some of the sites are tight, so where could we do that? I don't know. Let's try to find out. Let's figure it out. And you're certainly right that that there isn't the STEM building and the Cypress building. Their roof area, let's say, isn't big enough to to provide solar panels that would power those buildings. That doesn't mean there couldn't be something of the type that you're describing that would provide an opportunity to give information to students. This amount of solar panels can generate this much energy. You kind of learn a lot. It's quite remarkable, seeing what it can do versus what fossil fuels do, and trying to understand the relationship between them. So I think there are opportunities exactly as you're describing them, and let's work together. That would be my feeling about it.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, bridging the efficiency.
Microphone, Eric.
Oh, sorry. Bridging the efficiency and the best practices of the building with what are the educational components. And I would go even a step beyond that, which is just generally with the passerby in a lot of academic buildings, whether at colleges or with high school, in particular, how you connect to the life of the student. And we've done a lot of just simple signage that explains what's going on and making that a little bit more holistic. So it's not just the endeavors that might tie directly to classes, but it's also the recycling program, the signage, the student initiatives, and how do those get expressed and tied to how the building is, how the building functions, and what are opportunities for that. And I would add one other thing, which is you mentioned outdoor classrooms. I think in our experience, both the Quad and Cypress Field are such great outdoor classrooms that to sort of parse out a small rooftop area or a small enclave felt less powerful than going outside and having a direct connection to the building. But that's, I think, something that would be worth talking about.
Roger, I might quickly just add that I think you understate your contribution. Absolutely, you're a social studies teacher. You're also the founding teacher of our social justice program, and it's just powerful to hear you talk about our building and the ways that we can use it to further our kids' education, both in your program and school-wide. And I think Sam said the right piece, which is we're still in schematic design, and now we need to imagine. We've had lots of theoretical conversations about havens, and what does it mean that the Sagamore is a haven, that our journalism program is a haven, that drama is a haven, that global leadership is a haven, and so on. And now we need to figure out where in the building we can build those spaces. And I think you give us a couple of good ideas, and I'm particularly interested in the food justice notions that you put forth. So thank you.
Nancy, can I respond to that?
Sure.
On the Park Commission, Park and Recreation, I don't know his name.
Roger.
Roger. Just in terms of the outdoor gardening, I know it's not near the high school, but Lars Anderson, we have, the park department has a number of outdoor lots that people garden seasonally, and they have everything from flower gardens to food supply gardens and that kind of thing. But there's another spot that we'll be starting this year up at Lawton Street, again, a good distance away, but there's a number of raised beds, several handicapped accessible, and many standard lots that we are renting annually, same thing as we did at Lars. So something that you might want to, if kids can get up there and take a look and throw their name in there. So it sounds like a good opportunity.
I saw some other hands up. Somebody in a striped.
Sarah Stoutland.
Okay, yeah.
Sarah Stoutland.
Yeah, sorry. Couldn't see your face.
So, hi, my name is Sarah Stoutland. I have three kids, two who are still in Brookline schools, class of 2016, class of 2018, and class of 2022. And first of all, I want to thank you all for your work. And since efficiency has been a really popular word, I'd like to thank you for being very efficient in use of time. Because, the price gives everybody pause, but I do think it's worth it. And I just want to say that my class of 22 child has been in a crowded building since she was in first grade, and she will be in a crowded building. If she's lucky, she might have her senior year when she's not in a crowded building, and so have all of her classmates. And I'm really hoping that we don't have so many years of kids being in overcrowded buildings. So I really think, it's a good plan. It's not perfect. I think that, this idea that we are really in schematics, and a lot of things that have been mentioned are really still things to work on, adult ed and all that. And that I really, let's just get it done.
Thank you. We feel like that. Thank you. Other hands. Abby.
Abby Swain, 8 Emerson Street, close neighbor to the high school. I've been to almost all the public hearings, I think, on this project, and I just wanted to thank the school committee and everybody who's been involved for their diligence. I think it's been very methodical, careful, expansive, the process you've gone through to consider all options, the prices, the requirements versus what we want as a town. And I think what we've arrived at is really a great compromise. We don't have an overly massed area over by Welland Road, the original buildings. We balance that nicely with the new building on Cypress Street in Tappan. I think it's brilliant, and I really applaud the selectmen for having the courage to take 111 Cypress, because I think it's not only the best for the high school, but the best for the whole neighborhood in terms of highest and best use for us. So I really want to encourage folks who may be coming into this a little bit later to think about what this group must have gone through to get to this point. I think they've been remarkably deliberate, and I think we should give them our trust.
Thank you. Thank you, Abby. So another hand. Yes.
My name is Jack Spence. I live on Gorham Avenue, also very close to the high school. I just had a question. There was a comment made about we're in negotiations with the T about negotiations can mean yes or no, or a greater or lesser amount of money, or both. If it's no,
We hope it won't be
but
no,
could
but
you,
we've
my
had
question
some
is, could you
signals.
say a
Let
bit
me
more?
ask, let
Could
me
you
ask
say a bit
them.
more about the state of the negotiations?
Yeah.
Is it we hate this idea, or you're going to have to pay a lot of money?
No, we have not heard we hate this idea. We have not heard we hate this idea. In fact, we've had a lot of what we consider to be interest, large attendance at the meeting large attendance by staff of the MBTA at the meeting which we convened, and they had a lot of questions. They didn't have a lot of negativity, but I'll let Donna describe that.
So we've been working with two groups over at the MBTA, the real estate group, and they're the ones that would be doing the transaction with, as well as the capital group, which includes operations, safety. And we've met with them quite a bit through this whole process. We've actually submitted our plans. We've had a canvassing meeting where we've met with every department and we've received their feedback. We've already received from operations that they are okay with the crossing, which is a very big, that's the most important department to hear from. And we're continuing to get our comments back from all the canvassing of all the departments, and we'll be submitting our formal 30% submission, which is our detailed drawings that will go in. The MBTA will be working with us through this whole process. So they will be involved all the way through, so we'll be getting their comments all the way through. And we're continuing to work with the real estate. So we've had very good feedback. They will issue an appraisal, but we are in a position where we can negotiate with them. So we don't have the number yet, but we have estimates that we've been using. Is that enough? Okay.
Thank you. John Dempsey.
Thank you. I'm John Dempsey. I live on Brington Road. Two things. I'm glad to have the opportunity to have an audience. Everybody knows what I'm going to, all of you know what I'm going to say. So I just want to tell everybody else. The two things. George Cole, right at the very beginning of this process, told us on Brington Road, his first words out of his mouth, this is going to be a big building. Okay? And we all nodded, and we kind of understood. But then I started to think about it. I used to work at Devotion School. And at Devotion, when I was there, our average population was 725 kids. And I started to think, holy mackerel, we're talking about building a school for 700 high school kids on that small space. So I have to hand it to these guys. They have been struggling with that. How do we fit a school as big as Devotion School on that little space? And there are plenty of trade-offs, but of course our neighbors are all worried about the size, that looming size of the building. And the architects and the committee has tried to be responsive to that. But now that I have an audience, I want you to be thinking that is going to be a big, big building. I'm not against it, and anything the architects can still do to make it a little bit smaller. But I want that image in your heads. It's going to be pretty much as big as the Devotion School before they knocked everything down and started building. Okay? The other thing is that I'm glad we're working with the MBTA, but since I have an audience, there are two things with the MBTA. One is building over the right-of-way, but the other thing is it's a transit-oriented development that the town is engaged in. And anything that we can do to get pedestrian traffic to and from the T and the high school, we should do. And we have that opportunity. We have that opportunity because of the easements. The drainage easement that comes down off Brington Road leads directly to the MBTA stop. And the only problem is it's got a fence there. And we need to push the MBTA on the building over the tracks, but we also must have that pedestrian access with the transit-oriented development. And we can't say, oh, we tried, but the MBTA wouldn't let us do it. We need to put the pressure on for that. And it's particularly important for Brington Road because this building, this huge building, is going to isolate us more. And I go into the whole Olmsted history, and if you saw the display down at Walgreens window, you know something about it. And we have an opportunity here. And I want everybody to know that pedestrian access is very, very important. We've got an opportunity, we need to do it. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry to ignore you.
That's okay. I don't feel ignored in the least. Okay, yes.
Stacy.
Thank you. My name is Stacy Irwin Downey. I live in White Place. I am chair of the Board of Overseers of the Brookline High School Innovation Fund, and I have two students currently in Brookline High, and I have recently just finished my first series of college tours, so I have a little insight into where our students are going and what I've heard from them. And I want to applaud you. Although the facades are beautiful and I love the front porch concept, what I see of what you're talking about inside is what inspires me in terms of thinking about how my children are learning at the high school and what I want to see more of. I see much more interdisciplinary learning, as you've stated. I see that at all the college tours that I've just been on. And these havens that Anthony keeps talking about, I think, are so critical to building our community for the students in the high school. Also, living close to the high school, that group project work and problem solving that we see more and more of, our current space doesn't allow that kind of learning to really happen as much in the school as we would like it to. I know because my house receives those children with lots of snacks, and I don't mind that, but I think having those spaces within the classrooms and within the school is going to foster a sense of community and learning across disciplines with faculty and building those relationships that I think is actually going to help build the students that we want to build for that next set of learners. So just thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Also, there will be I'm not sure if you saw up on the new entry to the Roberts Wing, there is going to be a cafe that will be providing the snacks. Hopefully a revenue-producing opportunity for our restaurant program, probably at all hours of the night. No, just kidding. But maybe at least pulling some of them out of your living room. So.
Any other comments, questions? Is that it? I thought I saw somebody else over here. No? Okay. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your interest and your attendance and your very valuable comments. So let's bring it back to the committee members and engage in a discussion and a potential vote. Anybody want to speak to the project? And by the way, Nicole Gittens, who's right here, and Jordan Watts, as our student representative, have joined us a little after the introduction. So I just wanted to make sure you are aware that they are here. Do you have comments?
I just a quick, if I may, a very quick comment. At our last building committee meeting, I had a chance to thank a smaller group of the architects and with the entire team here, from Ron as well as Hill. I just want to again, I want to really second what Stacy just said, and thank you for working so hard to capture the vision as laid out in the education plan in a very space-constrained setting, and for taking so much time, even tonight, continuing what you've done since August of listening, taking feedback, and having the privilege of seeing iterations of concept designs and over these several months, and seeing how you incorporate the faculty feedback, student feedback. I look forward to seeing how Roger's comments are incorporated and other comments tonight in the continual development of the process. So I wanted to take a moment in this setting with the entire team here to thank you for being so responsive to the education plan, to being so responsive to students, to families, to residents, to the entire community, and for working so hard on behalf of kids, because this project ultimately is to benefit our students for many, many years to come. So thank you.
Great.
Thanks. I just want to add a thanks as well to the whole team. We're so appreciative of all the work that you've done with faculty and students. I also wanted to add just a comment about the fact that right now on the minds of many students and faculty members is the Parkland shootings, obviously, that happened in Florida. And I know staff members are thinking a lot about glass and things like that in the new building. The fact that we will have lockdown drills continuing and things like that. So just a little curious about your vision in terms of things like that, if you've given some thought to it at all. I know that there are some teachers who are thinking a lot about that and students as well. Sorry, that's it. Back, just back to the student safety piece. And
yeah, I mean, clearly that is on everyone's minds now, and we've had discussions throughout the design about how that might happen, and there are different goals and visions. One of the things that is extraordinary about the school today is the sense of openness and connectivity, and that culture that the students and everyone are kind of there together with each other for each other, and so however we think about this, however this develops in terms of the design of classrooms in order to ensure that there are places for safety or lockdown, that kind of how that safety measures would happen and how that gets incorporated into the design. I also think there are values at stake about kind of openness and connectivity and that sense of kind of being in it together that we wouldn't want to compromise in so doing. So I think it's extremely serious and an important thing to work through with you as we go through this and keep our eyes on kind of all the values that you've set up for the school as a whole. And throughout this design, we've looked at ways to ensure that entrances can be controlled and monitored in ways that, obviously some parts of the school aren't like that right now. So we're trying to ensure that anything that we're touching new has that ability to provide more controlled access if and when you want it, and the design of classrooms, that's kind of, we'll get to that at another level of detail, but I think those, we have experience thinking about that and working through how to design the relationship to corridors and how rooms are organized to, work through procedures that you would want to establish. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it. That sounds good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Jordan, did you?
You just need to give you a microphone.
I just wanted to kind of add, as a student at the high school, this is definitely something that needs to happen. I mean, we've already, split lunches up into 3, and you're still, shoved in the cafeteria, jostling for space, with, a delicate tray in your hand. It's something that needs to happen, and, we've obviously looked into a lot of different options, and this is one of the cheapest for, this amount of space. So, yes, it may be a little over what we might have originally wanted or intended, but, it's something that needs to happen, and it needs to happen soon, because, we're already, packed in there, and, this extra space is, something that's going to be really helpful and really important to, for the next few years.
What else can we say? He summed it up perfectly, didn't he?
I was just going to say a couple of things. One, a lot's been said about where we are in the process. This is early. This is the end of schematic design. There's a lot to do. I think it should be acknowledged that a tremendous amount of work has already happened to get us to this point. This is an incredibly complex project with a lot of moving parts. This team has synthesized a lot of information very quickly and come up with, I think, some very compelling design solutions, and so that shouldn't be lost, that all of that has happened in a relatively short time. From the perspective of the Brinkton Road neighborhood, when we found out about a year or two ago that there was a 40B project planned at 111 Cypress, it was a real wake-up call that that property was not used for its highest and best use. And so when we started to see what could happen there, we thought, wow, this is really unsettling, and this could be a real opportunity for the high school. And so the neighborhood reached out to the town and suggested, again, that they look at this property in earnest, which thankfully they have, and we're very happy that they've acquired that property. We know that this project is being handled with a lot more sympathy and sensitivity to not just the town, but the neighborhood than what would have happened there. And we appreciate their willingness to work with us, continue to make refinements based on our feedback, and hopefully that will continue into the next phases. It's a big building, as John said, but it's a great building for the town. It's the right use for that property, and I think it really serves as an anchor of Cypress and allows the high school to extend all the way out to Cypress and claim 2 full sides of that field, which I think is a really important thing to do in terms of this unusual balance of school defining one side and town residences defining the other side of what's effectively a kind of town green for us. So it's a really important space in Brookline, and I think this project at 111, not to mention all of the other great things about it, does a lot to improve the visibility of the high school and talk about its importance in town. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Other comments? So I would like to propose a motion.
Actually, can I just pick up on that? Sure. I just think that last piece I think is really important, because I think one of the things that's been unique about this process is how this is such a town school process knitted so closely together. And I think you all, and I think Bill, you had, Mr. Ron, you had actually thought about this from the very beginning and said, this is such an incredible opportunity for a civic space and everything fronting a civic green. And some of your earlier slides, Sam and Eric sort of talked about that in just sort of bringing that to life. And if you just think about how many people use this property from, 6 a.m., if not before, through till the wee hours, literally Monday through Sunday. As Arthur said, it's adult ed. It's my mother's going to kill me. She's one of the little old ladies at the pool. That's my mom, and everything from the 6-year-old, my little 6-year-old taking swim lessons there, and so it's just an incredible moment and place that's the sort of the jewel of our town. And I think we've spent a lot of time in this town thinking about, should we have a second high school? What would that mean? Do we want to be like towns with 2 high schools or not? And just this notion of staying unified with one high school, one campus, one green, and just bringing both the town and the school uses together. I think it's just great modeling for the students, if nothing else. It's great modeling for the kind of town we want to be. And so I'm proud that we didn't strip out. We've held tight to our tap-in gym work and our pool entry and our Cypress field, and we've held all that really close and thought about, who are all the people using this building. We've talked about town meeting using the auditorium. We're talking about one of the performance spaces on the main floor of the new 111 Cypress building is going to be fronting the green, because that, they can then spill out afterwards that way, not backwards into the neighborhood. So even just all those 1,000 little details that sort of said, what does it mean for this building to be doing what it's doing in relationship to the neighbors, to everything else. And so, I think you really have struck this incredible, I wouldn't even call it a compromise, because it's it's a synergy. It's like everything. Yeah, it's a balance, but it's like it's all sort of elevating the other pieces between kids and teachers and neighbors and the MBTA, Knockwood. We're still doing well with them, and so anyway, so just thank you, and thank you to the neighbors who've been so engaged all the way through. We've had 3 or 4 neighbors at every single meeting, if not more, in living rooms and before and after. And Matt is your voice, but each of you is your voice as well. We've had student voices, we've had teacher voices, we've had parent voices, and so I think it's just been a really incredible experience. So knock wood that we've come this far, and it's really exciting. So thank you to both Ron and Hill for kind of leading us here, and to Ray Masak, who's our project manager as well.
Great, thank you, Susan. So I'd like to propose a vote of this body. As you know, we are advisory to the building commission, the school committee, and the select board about this project. Those three bodies need to vote to move this project forward, and the select board would be the body that would put this issue on the ballot for the voters on May 8th. So I'd like to propose that we vote that the BHS Expansion Advisory Building Committee, which is us, advise the Building Commission, of which George is a member, the School Committee, of which Susan is a member, and the Select Board, of which I'm a member, to accept the schematic design and project budget. That project budget and schematic design are included in the package that we saw tonight, and presented to our committee and the public on Monday, February 26th, advising those boards to move ahead with this project. So, can I have a vote about that? Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Okay.
Mary Ellen, are you on our committee? Vote. Okay. Mary Ellen's
Okay.
voting.
Oh, Mary Ellen Dunn. I didn't realize she was here. Okay, great. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 in favor. I see no abstentions and no opponents. We are missing Mel Kleckner and Ray Masak, as I said before. But thank you very much. That's fantastic. And I'd like to thank the committee members. They have worked hard. It's been a long process. The architects have done a fabulous job. Our project manager, Hill, has done a fantastic job. But the committee members have also been diligent about reading all these materials, coming to the meetings, expressing their opinions, representing their ideas. So I'd like to thank you.
Can I do? So now that we have a vote, I also would like to thank the people who have brought us to this place from an intellectual point of view and from an educational point of view, and that is our educational leaders, some of whom are here at the table, our superintendent, our headmaster, our dean, our superintendent, our deputy superintendent, but Andrew, Anthony, Janae, Nicole, Mary Ellen, and not to leave out everyone else who has been involved, Hal Mason, so many other people who have been part of the, Sam Zimmerman, who's our deputy for student services, special education. There have been so many incredible moments, educational leadership moments throughout this process that you all have brought your vision, your lens, and you've channeled teachers, you've channeled students, but just your educational leadership, and all the way going back to the education plan, which is a giant document. If you haven't read it online, I would encourage you to do so, because that really has formed the basis for everything that we're trying to do here. So it's just, we're lucky to have every single one of you. Thank you. It's been a terrific process from that point of view also. So that has created all of this that you see. It's kind of incredible.
Thank you. And I neglected to mention that Ian Rothman, who's also a member of our committee, is out of the country and was unable to be here tonight, but he has been very steady attendee, always interested, always pushing the envelope, asking excellent questions. So I want to acknowledge his contribution. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for coming and giving your opinions, yay, nay, or otherwise.
We'll be back here
and we will, let me tell you about the process going forward. Tomorrow night we will have a joint meeting in this room, this very room, with the full select board, the school committee, and the building commission. And again, I am looking to the chair of the select board. 6 o'clock. Okay.
Done by 7.
Done by 7, yes.
He's
We're under strict instructions. We'll be done by 7.
So we hope to see you then, and after that, the select board will presumably vote about a week or two later about putting this on the ballot, and it will. I think the deadline for that is March 13th. And then we will bring our ideas to the wider public. And any of you who are interested in helping on that, you can. Thank you.
May
May. Thank you.
Thank you.